A Thursday edition of Birds 365. You got a three-way contributing at the top. Yours truly, Jody McDonald. Jeff Kerr is the sidekick today. And John McMullen will step into the guest spot to start the show. He's got COVID testing to get through today. And Johnny, may you fail your test miserably. No, I'm only kidding. Come on. Hope all is well with you. And glad to get both of you two guys here. McMullen, we will start with you since we know you got to exit stage left. Nick Sirianni yesterday met with the media, and I would say it was probably the toughest session that he's ever had with the media, just judging you guys, the assembled questioners who kind of put him through his paces yesterday. I thought he was good enough to hold back the fire, but it was the toughest media session he's ever had. How do you think he did? And am I correct in saying, yeah, the guys were out for a little blood yesterday?
I don't think we were out for blood. I just think there were some obvious questions that he needed to answer. The obvious themes, obviously no pre-snap motion, the running aspect of it, and then the discipline issue, the penalties, because he always talks about accountability. And then one thing I did want to get into, and I didn't, was his reaction to Derek Barnett and things like that. Because, Derek Barnett, and this is not a defense of him, he's made some boneheaded decisions, and they predate Nick Sirianni, but it's also not only him. I think he's been called for 2 of the 35 penalties officially. That's not him. That's not only him. So I don't think he can show that frustration as a head coach, but obviously you only have limited time. So there were some obvious questions. I don't think it was hard. I think he handled it fine. I think it's fair to, scratch your head at some of the answers, especially we consider, some RPOs that end up as a pass, a run. Well, Nick, maybe you should take away the option and just hand off the football. You are allowed to do that. It is not an indictable offense, even though some people who think the league is going a certain way think it is. It isn't. You're allowed to turn around and hand the football off and take the option away from the quarterback. And when the same thing is happening over and over again, you can't just say, well, we consider this a running play. A running play is baked in. A running play is called. Well, you didn't run it.
John, I almost started a little battle on Twitter last night with my stat on the league leaders in yards per carry on first down, and it's Miles Sanders by a long shot. And someone said to me, well, that's a misleading stat. And from a guy who still plays a sport in tournaments where your average is your average, bowling, it's not misleading. It is what it is. Like, why doesn't this coach see this stuff? Like, if he's getting fed all this information, why doesn't he see that and say, oh, you know what? We might actually get ourselves in the second and manageable if we just give our guy the ball.
Well, I do think there's context, so I hate to agree with Twitter trolls, but I do think there's context. For instance, if you're Derrick Henry, and I say this all the time, and Miles has tremendous statistics over his first 2 seasons, he doesn't have the volume that those guys have. He's not given the attention those guys have as the top running backs in the NFL. So there is, the more you get it, the more attention you're going to get, the more those numbers are going to go down. And more to the mean. And then you really start to figure out who the best runners are in a league. And we all know who those names are. And Miles is a very explosive runner. He's certainly the best runner on this team, but I don't think he belongs in that conversation. So I'll start off with that. But I also believe he's got to be given the football, certainly on this team, with these playmakers, more than 2 times on the ground in any football game. So that's what I'm saying. If you're in the guts of the game and you're calling RPO, 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 and you're saying, well, there's the option. I mean, if the defender does this, we're going to hand the ball off, and it's just not happening. That's where you have to put on the brakes and say, now we got to get the football to this guy. This is the same coach who said it's about players, players, players first. So if your original plan isn't getting the football to one of your best players, you have to go players, 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 and cross out that original plan and go to something else. And that's where I say, take the option off the table. I was very worried about this college-y, and I use that term a little tongue-in-cheek, but I was very worried about this offense getting really repetitive really quickly. And I didn't think it would happen this quickly. And we're here pretty quickly.
J-Mac, I'll give you one of the answers that Nick gave that I kind of rolled my eyes at. Talking about accountability, talking about players not doing what they're supposed to do, a.k.a. Taking penalties. He said that when they're in game film reviewing afterwards, sometimes they say, hey, we've got to do this. And then sometimes they say, hey, we've got to do this. Really, raising your voice is going to get the guys to not jump offside, not go downfield too quickly on an offensive lineman on a passing play, which may or may not be a passing play because it's an RBO. Nick raising his voice is going to remove the penalties from the Philadelphia Eagles, the most penalized team in the NFL. Did you find that kind of eye-rolling too?
No, I didn't. Maybe I'm just used to Nick at this point. I kind of know what he was trying to say. Sometimes it's just a quick adjustment, and sometimes you just roll through it, and it's obvious. And other times you gotta. I think he was trying to say you got to raise your voice. You got to be a little bit more angry about it. I think he was just trying to explain the dichotomy of different situations. But yeah, I guess I talk to the guy 3 times a week, so I kind of get a feel for him. So to others who don't get to see him that much, maybe it comes across. He but that's part of his personality, part of his, and that's why day one everyone was like, "What the heck is this?" Now that we're deep into it, I kind of know what it is. I don't think personally, I don't think that was a big deal, but I can see how others would. Say, oh, what is this guy doing? But I just think that's his personality. He's trying to explain the differences in certain penalties. And yeah, dumb personal foul is probably a little bit more than a questionable holding call on an offensive lineman. On the latter, you might just say, get your hands inside, borderline call. On the former, on the penalty, on the personal foul, you might have to say, this is stupid and call the player out.
John, I saw one of the memes yesterday on Twitter. I guess it was Nick Sirianni holding the paper or whatever. What was he trying to explain on that? I must have missed that yesterday.
Yeah, Nick's great. He held up his game plan. I tried to get a picture of it, and I'm like, can I blow this up? He put it out there for everyone to see. I thought that was funny. That was yesterday. He was trying to explain when he grades plays, and he puts the number of the player who made a mistake on the bottom left-hand corner, and then obviously makes the corrections. So it was one of those things. And I don't want to stop Nick Sirianni from doing that stuff, to be honest, because I think it's valuable. It explains how he does his job. It gives some context, and that's the kind of stuff I think is good. That maybe other people say, "What is he doing? And I think it's always the more information you get, the more explanations you can give to the fans. I think is a good thing. And the last thing I want to do is put him in a shell where he doesn't offer up that kind of information. I love when he does stuff like that, to be honest.
All right, here's one of the questions that wasn't asked yesterday, John, that I was hoping was going to be asked because I don't really know what Sirianni's answer would be. I would guess that would be a non-answer, but I'd still like to hear him attempt to answer it. And it's a very difficult question to ask because it's very subjective. So far, the Eagles this year have had massive penalty problems and pretty major injury problems. And they handled their preseason, and I consider preseason, I won't even, if you want to, you can go all the way back to the summer when they had their non-mandatory workouts and take it all the way up until yesterday. Or you could start it just from training camp. Any way you start it, the Eagles have worried more about not doing too much and not worried at all about not doing too little. Well, how do you correct not doing enough? Well, you can't because it's already come and gone, and they look like an underprepared team. The injuries, very subjective. Could more work have gotten them in better condition, built their bodies to not get hurt? Who knows? Well, we know what the results are, and the results aren't good. They've had major injuries to major players. The question I would have liked to hear to ask was, if you had a chance to do it all over again, do you think you'd put some more work in before the season started? What do you think the coach's answer would be?
Well, I think we have asked him that kind of numerous times throughout the process, and it's, kind of he always defaults to, he takes, listens to the advice from the training staff, the medical staff, and formulates a plan. And he's always said, ultimately, it's up to him, which I don't think is true. I think it's an organizational decision. So in a lot of ways, in fact, I know it's an organizational decision. So in a lot of ways, it's out of his hands as far as that stuff. Look, I think it's funny, you have that term sports science. I think it's funny when you put the word science on something that's so uncertain, because nobody can point to an avenue and say, this is the way to do it. This is the way. The Eagles are like everybody else. They hire these guys and they say, this will help us get through the season. Our players will be fresher. I always say you can't legislate injuries. I guess, to a certain extent, you cannot play guys, not practice guys. They're probably not going to get injured sitting down in a meeting room. But when they get out to practice, and you saw it last week with Jordan Mailata, it doesn't even have to be a game.
Right.
This is a sport where guys are going to get hurt. And the aging guys with an injury history are more likely to get hurt. So they developed their plan. They hired the people they believe in, and they're using that plan. But it's fair for people. Yeah, it's very fair for people to question it, especially with this organization's history with injuries. But I think most of that has to do with sticking with aging players with an injury history. And I don't know how. I mean, I can't advocate moving on from Lane Johnson or they were thinking about trading Brandon Brooks, but with that contract, they weren't going to get any bites. So, I mean, I guess you got to run it back. I don't know what you can do with players like that other than try to manage them through the week and get them to the game. I think that's what you should do. I think that's a very difficult answer, and I think it's out of the purview of Nick Sirianni, but he's tried to answer it many times, and he said he's not the expert when it comes to the training methods and the medical stuff, and that's other people, and they give him the advice, and this is what the Eagles have decided on. The problem is Howie Roseman might be making these decisions instead of Ars Darnota, who's their chief medical officer, and Ted Rath and Tom Hunkel are their, sports science guys.
Speaking of Howie Roseman, I saw Jeff McClain got to ask Nick Sirianni about his, I guess, since Doug had the weekly meetings with Jeffrey Lurie, if Nick partaked in them, and he said, I go in there every day, and I'm like, oh boy, that's probably not the answer he should have gave, but it is what it is. What did you make of, Nick Sirianni basically going into his CEO pretty much?
Well, everybody knows Jeffrey Lurie's involved. So I think and I can't speak for Jeff, but I think he was just trying to get it on record of when it happens. Everybody knows Jeffrey's involved. I do, the Peterson meetings were organizational meetings. So Jeffrey would have essentially Howie, Doug, and Don Smolensky, which I think is funny for this reason. So take after the famous story about Green Bay, where the Eagles upset Aaron Rodgers in Lambeau Field, and Jeffrey Lurie's asking Doug Peterson, why didn't you pass the football more? They ran it. They were very successful. And I get a kick out of it because it was an organization. It wasn't a meeting with Doug Peterson per se. It was the organizational meeting with his heads of each department that he had every week. And then I could just imagine he would go to Don Smolensky and say, what about the recycling efforts at Lincoln Financial Field? That was the meeting. That it was an organizational meeting. It wasn't a football meeting. He was asking Doug Peterson about his expertise, then Don, then Howie. And so I do think that was a little bit overblown by how they did it. But everybody knows Jeffrey's involved. Everybody knows if the head coach isn't going to talk to Jeffrey Lurie, well, yeah, eventually he's going to come talk to you. I do find the hire more and more interesting as it goes on for a couple reasons. Nick Sirianni doesn't seem to be much of an analytics-based coach, which surprises me. Seems more old school, seems far lesser analytically driven than Doug Peterson was. And that doesn't kind of mesh with Jeffrey Lurie. And then offensively, again, with the collegey RPO type stuff, that's not what Jeffrey Lurie likes. So maybe it comes down to he just convinced him that he was a leader. And I hope that's the case, because that would make more sense when he went this direction with the hire.
John, your story about, and I'd never heard that before. Thanks for sharing that with me and with all of Birds 365 Nation here, that it was an organizational meeting and it was more than just Howie and Doug and Jeffrey in the room when he asked them about throwing more against the Packers after an upset victory in Lambeau. That bothers me more. If I'm Doug Peterson, it would tick me off more. Wait a minute. We just won a game and you're going to ask me in front of the president why I didn't pass the ball more? You don't want to take me aside and go, hey, could we have thrown the ball more? No, in a formal meeting with other people, you're going to call me out after we got an upset win in Green Bay? For me, that makes it even worse if that was the case.
Well, I do think ultimately Doug was upset by it. I don't know if that's why, but that could be an explanation of it. But I certainly do know he was upset about getting asked about a win, about how he went about, style points, essentially, when the NFL is supposed to be about winning by hook or by crook. That's what everyone says. So style points shouldn't apply, should never apply. And he was upset. For it's tough to get past the obvious reasons for why you're upset. I mean, any head coach, I think, would not take it well if you win an NFL game, because they're very hard to win. And somebody comes in and says, oh, but you should have won it by this, essentially. And meanwhile, the other side is, it's sort of like the biggest question I had for Nick Sirianni in all of this, and after the game especially, was when he said, well, we knew we wanted to keep pace with Dallas. We knew they were going to be able to score points. And I said this yesterday on the show, Jody. No, you don't match punches with Mike Tyson in his prime. You try to outbox him. You don't go at, I hope he learned this week. Let's try to outscore Patrick Mahomes. Let's try to be a faster pace offense. You got to go about it a different way. That was the most concerning part of the whole thing to me.
John, this is one thing I wanted to bring up too. everybody says, well, the Chiefs could be 0-3. I look at it as they could be 3-0. I've watched every Chiefs game. I basically watch them like I do the Eagles. I rewatch them once or twice, and turnovers just kill this football team. They have 6 turnovers in their last 13 possessions. They probably beat LA if they don't turn the football over. Mahomes got a little too fancy on a couple plays, and just inexcusable fumbles by Tyreek Hill and Clyde Edwards-Helaire were a part of that. And to me, it just seems like that's how you beat the Kansas City Chiefs. I know there are different ways to do it, but basically having Andy Reid team beat themselves. Did Nick Sirianni address that at all, or Jonathan Gannon yesterday?
I think Nick Sirianni will learn from what happened in Dallas. I certainly hope so. I don't, I know Andy Reid wouldn't take could be 3-0. I mean, they don't care. That's NFL games. You could take, especially close games, you could take a play or two in each game and say, we could have won this one. Yeah, but you didn't. And especially a team with that kind of success, they're never going to use that as an excuse. On paper, it doesn't look good because they're upset. They know they've beaten themselves. And they're good. And they're really good. And at some point, that's going to show up. And right now, the Eagles aren't really good. So, I mean, if you want some optimism, I guess you have to say, well, hopefully Kansas City doesn't figure it out for a couple more weeks. Because if they figure it out this week, and they've had a lot of adversity, obviously Andy going in the hospital, number one. But he's back. Maybe that's a little bit of a distraction. Maybe they do turn it over, but the Eagles haven't forced a ton of turnovers, to say the least. It just looks like a tough matchup on paper, a really tough matchup.
Yeah, I wanted to further that turnover conversation because I want to give credit to Hargrave because he's played as well as he has. The one turnover they have gotten in 3 games, they didn't really force, in a way. Hargrave pushed a Cowboy player into Dak Prescott, and he gave up the football. They didn't even get their hands on it until Fletcher Cox just happened to look up and say, oh, look what I've got. And he grabs it out of midair and then goes swimming on the ground. So the whole hits feeling of doing things, philosophy of doing things hasn't really turned into a lot of turnovers so far. Yeah, the Chiefs were just a mess last week, turning it over 4 times. Is that something you are heavily emphasizing if you're Jonathan Gannon this week? We've got to do exactly what the Chargers did. If we don't get 3 turnovers, we're not going to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. Is that something you think the coach will rely on?
Well, I think he always stresses it. He does always stress it, but you can't game plan for turnovers. I mean, same thing what I said about the Chiefs, okay, but, Javon Hargrave made Dak Prescott uncomfortable enough to do what he did. So that to me is certainly a generated turnover. And it was funny because we asked Darius Slay, no interceptions. He said, Fletch got one. And we said, that was a fumble, buddy. We had to tell him it was a fumble. It was ruled a fumble. So Slay is funny with the rules. It's so over-legislated he can't figure them out. But yeah, I mean, the turnovers haven't come. They keep saying they come in bunches and all the cliches, and they do. I mean, they do. That's how this league works. But it also works that, playmakers. Trevon Diggs makes plays. He makes plays. Finds a way to make. There's a young player. Now, he also takes some chances. I mean, that's part of it as well. Guys who turn the football over, especially in the secondary, are guys who are confident to take chances and talented. I don't see a lot of those guys on the Eagles outside of Darius Slay. And then you couple it with they just play a ton of zone. So you don't give players who are willing to take chances. Like if you had a Trayvon Diggs, they're not going to have as many opportunities to take chances. So then you're left with quarterbacks making poor throws, overthrowing people, things like that, where you're playing center field. And that's what Anthony Harris did so well. in his previous life. So I mean, I don't think they have a ton of playmakers in the back seven. I've been talking about it for a long time. So the front four's got to make the plays.
John, concerning comments that you brought up Darius Slay, and I know where he was getting that at, but I can't wait to ask a couple Chiefs players this about Patrick Mahomes. And Darius Slay was asked if Patrick Mahomes is most talented quarterback he's ever faced. And he said, well, no, basically he said I face Aaron Rodgers twice a year, and he's never faced Patrick Mahomes. So I don't know. I feel like this comment, even though it's not that big of a deal, it really could bite him just because Mahomes and the Chiefs offense could make a point this Sunday.
Well, one, I agree with Darius. I mean, Rodgers is, and Jody knows, I feel this way. Rodgers is the best quarterback in football when he's clicking on all cylinders. And you saw him 37 seconds. That's all he needed. That's not his slight. He was very complimentary overall to Patrick Mahomes. Everybody knows Patrick Mahomes is a great quarterback. Is very difficult to stop. Darius Slay knows that. Jonathan Gannon knows that. Everybody knows that on the Eagles. But yeah, I don't know where we've gotten in sports where you make these comps and you say, oh, I think Aaron Rodgers is better than you. And that's not essential. I mean, but that was what Slay was getting at. Like, that's not an insult to anybody in the history of the world. This was like the DK Metcalf thing with Jim Schwartz, who said DK isn't as good as Calvin Johnson. Oh, that's a slight to DK Metcalf? That's a slight to his knowledge of history, because if he thinks he's Calvin Johnson, he has no flipping idea. And that's, if players are going to take those things, and that's what Jim said at the time, there's nothing you can. I mean, you're not insulting the guy. And Slay wasn't insulting Patrick Mahomes. If he wants to use it, though, and that's the way some of the Chiefs go with it, that's fine. But you can't compare some. If you're in the same sentence with Aaron Rodgers, you were just complimented.
Right. I wholeheartedly agree with your stance on that, John. Someone who's not going to be compared, certainly because they're not quarterbacks, but on the level of their talent with Aaron Rodgers at all, Eagles offensive line fill-ins as of right now. They've got to come up with a bunch of them, both guard positions, and still to be determined left tackle. The coach didn't want to tip his hand yesterday and said we will actually keep that to ourselves for the purposes of keeping the other team uneducated as to what we're going to do. Whether they would move guys around from the two guard position, maybe put Herbeck back on the right and bring Dickerson over to the left. Whether Mailata would be back in time for this week's game, don't know that that's going to be the case. Either way, Jeff Stoutland's got his hands full, and he's got to come up with some answers for this team this week. Yeah, they all got the chance to get their hands dirty last week, and your boy Dillard actually played pretty well. I give him credit for a better game than I thought he was going to have. How much of a disadvantage are they at this week? Is Kansas City's defense going to make them pay a price? Dallas' defense wasn't considered to be all that good, but they played pretty damn well the other night against the Eagles. How does this matchup the Eagles just put together on the fly offensive line against the KC defense look for you?
Yeah, it was funny when Nick said that, because I was the one who asked him that question. He was like, we think we have a competitive advantage this week. So I'm thinking to myself, well, two things. I don't think the Chiefs care whether Suo Peta or Nate Herbig or Landon Dickerson are moving places. And the second thing is, are they not practicing? Did they scale back to a walkthrough so we couldn't see who's the starting offensive line? And does that mean they're not going to practice today so we can't see the starting offensive line? I mean, I don't know for a fact, but Jordan's not going to play. I mean, sprained knee, usually the best case scenario is 2 weeks. So he didn't practice yesterday. It's just an estimation because it was a walkthrough. So it's probably going to be Dillard at left tackle. Then you start talking about guards. And you want Landon to get the reps, obviously. So I asked the question for the reason that Isaac's out for the year now. Brandon Brooks is going to be back at some point. So do you just want to make the move now and keep him at left guard for the rest of the year? And Nick didn't want to go down that road for competitive advantage, whatever. And I'm Kansas City's not going to be worried about any of the possibilities. They're just going to show up and play. I am more interested because Dillard did play well, but I said leading up to the week, that was a perfect situation for him, Jody. You probably remember this. Dallas doesn't have DeMarcus Lawrence out there. They don't have any pass rushers. They were down, I think, 6 defensive linemen. All they had was Randy Gregory coming off the COVID list. So it was a perfect situation. He took advantage of it, and he played a solid game. This week, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. And I am interested. That's one of the things, if he does play, and I think he will play, as I said, how Andre Dillard holds up. Because if he continues to play at least an acceptable level, that'll make it easier for the Eagles to make a move at the trade deadline because they've made their decision to left tackle. And the better Andre plays, the better it is for the Eagles to get something on the back end.
John, obviously, Eagles fans are probably fearing the deep bomb from Patrick Mahomes to Tyreek Hill, but the one I'm worried about more is how is this team going to cover Travis Kelce when Dalton Schultz just kind of went off on him last week? Kelce's had 6 catches for 75 yards in each of his 3 games. Like, how do you counteract? I mean, he's going to get his, but how do you try to slow him down?
Well, one, you have to stop the run, and I know that doesn't make sense. But once once the Cowboys started rolling and the linebackers are taking that step forward in those zones, trying to plug, that's 7 yards coming basically every play, 6, 7, 8 yards. Then all of a sudden they went over the top, and you could see on the one touchdown, Alex Singleton wasn't deep enough. Why wasn't he deep enough? Because he's trying to plug the holes in the running game. So I think that would help if they could stop the run. They could at least, bracket him a little bit better. But this guy's the best receiving tight end in football. He's going to make plays against the best defensive plans. He's a great route runner, understands how to get open. Sort of like Zach Ertz from the route running perspective, but with more athleticism, more playmaking ability. It's a tough matchup. It's a tough matchup for everybody. So, I imagine every team that plays Kansas City gets the Kelce question and how you going to deal with him. It's like any superstar player. If you give up to go the NBA route, if, guy scores 40 and you give up 30, it's probably a good day.
Agreed. Kelsey's going to get his this Sunday. All right, John, last thing, and appreciate it. And we'll let you get off in testing after this. We haven't brought up Jalen Hurts yet, 33 minutes since the show started. And I think that's a good thing, as a matter of fact, because certainly he can be a guy who could be questioned. And another good thing was, at least in my media followings, you got yours, listening to the radio, reading all you guys who cover the team. Nobody's brought up Deshaun Watson yet this week. And when that
Chris
game
Sims
ended,
brought him up. Jake
Who
Glazer
did?
brought him up. Chris Sims, your buddy, brought him up.
Okay. All right.
Jake Glazer brought him up. Yeah, it never ends. Chris Sims, and I don't, this has been out there for a long time. I mean, the Eagles have tremendous interest in Deshaun Watson. Jeffrey Lurie gave Howie Roseman the green light to make a trade. If he can make a trade, that's been out there for a while. Nothing's changed from the Watson perspective of doesn't want to play here, has a trade, no trade clause. Now, from the Eagles' perspective, if nobody else wants him, and ultimately Philadelphia's the only option, I think he would change his mind to get out of Houston. but I don't see that happening. And that's the Jay Glazer part, who said Houston is starting to lower its demands, and Miami is still by far the leader in the clubhouse. So people are mentioning him. As long as Miami's an option, as long as Miami is interested, I don't think the Eagles are in the conversation because he doesn't want to play here.
And he does
not because not because they trust their quarterback, because he doesn't want to play here.
Right.
The Eagles want Deshaun Watson. I've said that 100 times. I'll say it to my dying breath. They want Deshaun Watson. I don't think there's a path to get him.
And there's a bunch of moving parts in there. And the fact that he has a no-trade clause is a major impediment if the Eagles do want to get their hands on Deshaun Watson. J-Mac, good job, brother. Thank you very much. I will see you back here tomorrow morning when we talk about the Chiefs winning by 3 touchdowns. Now, I might be tipping my hand here a little bit, but we'll get your take tomorrow. Thanks for jumping on today.
All right. Thank you, guys.
J-Mac, John McMullen here on Birds 365. All right. Jody McDonald, Jeff Kerr, got plenty to still sink our teeth into. Hour number 2, going to have a buddy up, Matt Verderame from Fansided, covers the entire league, does a league-wide podcast. It's very good as well. But he's a Kansas City guy. He grew up in Kansas City and has been a Chief fan his whole life. Always has a good perspective on the Chiefs. So we're going to get Matt Verderame of Fansided up in hour number 2. We come back. More with Jeff Kerr and Jody McDonald here on Birds 365 next.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the memories. Go for the view that goes on forever. Go for the bubbles in your bathtub and in your drink. Go to bed whenever you want. Or don't. Go for him. Go for her. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass. Free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit. Glass is for cocktails, right?
It's for this, 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 and that.
Is the length of the glass equal to your...
You betcha.
But is it made out of...
Glass?
Okay, but is the rip...
Smooth?
Will you stop doing...
That?
I'm the professional here.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. 1 free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. All from the company that's highly awarded. 0 carbs, 0 sugar, and deliciously tasting vodka. So good, it just disappears.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
When it comes to the fight against insurance companies, large corporations, and the healthcare industry, injured victims are always the underdog. But that doesn't worry us. At Messa & Associates, we're an injury law firm from Philadelphia, and we come to fight. Our clients know that they've got representation with a chip on its shoulder, and it's the same chip that makes Philly the toughest city in the country. Call 215-568-3500 or visit us online at messalaw.com. Messa & Associates, the toughest injury firm in Philadelphia.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the game. Go for the hits. Go for the fans. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
We are the... Oh, we're not the Mac and Mac guys. It's one Mac, it's one Kerr. Jody McDonald and Jeff Kerr doing the Birds 365 thing here for you on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. Kind of licking our wounds after Monday night's beatdown at the hands of the Dallas Cowboys with Jeff Kerr. I do want to bring a couple things up with you here, JK. Let me go here first. We'll get back to Deshaun Watson and Jalen Hurts in just a second. I was just going through on EaglesWire.com the Pro Football Focus grades for the Eagles for the game the other night against the Dallas Cowboys. And they break them down by offense and defense, put them in the order that they graded out. And the seventh best defensive player for the Philadelphia Eagles, according to Pro Football Focus, in Monday's night's game was Jason Hargrave. He was seventh on this team. Fletcher Cox graded out higher than he did. Kavon Wallace did. Marcus Epps really did. TJ Edwards. Now, give Edwards credit. He kind of got forced into action. The linebackers weren't playing well. They got him out there onto the field. He did make a couple plays. I kind of agree with that one. Josh Sweat was the only, let me emphasize this, only, like Nick Sirianni raised his voice yesterday. I'll do the same. The only defensive end who did anything for the Eagles. And Avonte Maddox did play well, but I don't know that anybody played better than Jason Hargrave. I don't know that anybody's played better on the defense all three games so far this year than Hargrave. That's why I got to admit, I still don't completely understand how Pro Football Focus comes up with their grades, because just my knowledge of football, the way I look at a football game, he's the Eagles' best defensive player. He has been 3 games in a row. I don't know how he grades out 7th on Monday night's affair.
Yeah, Pro Football Focus to me, I always use it as a tool, but I don't treat it as gospel. I know there are some people on Twitter, just because they pay a certain amount of money for Pro Football Focus, and they treat it like it's gospel. And I'm like, hold on a second. You know, I know you're going for the retweets. I know you're going for the likes. I get it. But let's put this into perspective here. There's no way Javon Hargrave should have been the 7th highest graded player on the Eagles defense. I'm sorry. You know, I don't even want to go to a watch the tape thing. You don't have to watch the tape. You and I both saw Joe. And look, I use Pro Football Focus. I use it to study the pressure, study the hurries when I'm watching the game. So it's a resourceful tool. I do like Pro Football Focus, but yeah, I don't get the grading part of it either. Like, you know, when a player plays bad and they grade bad, okay, it makes a lot of sense. But I would like for them to explain why Javon Hargrave got the grade he got. And I'm looking at it as, okay, 2 sacks. Well, they gave him 1, which I don't know how that changes. But 4 quarterback hits, you know, again, like, isn't that part of it? I guess because the Eagles couldn't stop a lick when it came to running the football. But that ain't Javon Hargrave and Fletcher Cox's fault. I mean, Dallas basically double-teamed both of them and said, Derek Barnett, Josh Sweat, you got to get to us when we go up the middle. I mean, when you double-team a guy, there's nothing you can do here. So, I don't know. I think it's being a little too harsh on Javon Hargrave, and I know a lot of people were making a big deal about this on Pro Football Focus too. Even after this week, Jalen Hurts is one of the top 10 great quarterbacks in football by Pro Football Focus. I'm like, do you really? I mean, look, I like Jalen Hurts a lot. Do you really think he's been a top 10 quarterback this year? I don't. And
now this one I can explain. And again, Monday's grade wasn't as bad as one would think it would be. I think he was the Eagles' 5th ranked player on offense from Monday night. I'm double checking 6th. Excuse me. No, 5th. This one I can explain. I comprehend it. I don't agree with it, but I comprehend it. The way the Pro Football Focus grades, every play is equal. On any given play, they don't try and factor in down, distance, score on the scoreboard. And Jalen Hurts made some plays in the 4th quarter of that game when basically it was already decided. The game was over and done with. We were just figuring out how many points the Dallas Cowboys were going to win by. And that's the same. It's looked at and graded the same exact way as the first possession of the game when it's 0-0. When the game hasn't been decided yet, well, a comprehensive football mind is going to realize that those accomplishments are not the same thing. The start of a game, when it is hanging the balance, a game, and hopefully we don't have too many of these games, only if the Eagles are well ahead, like, say, the Falcon game, which, oh, by the way, couple of Eagles did that too. Their only sacks prior to this past week all season were in the last couple minutes of that Falcon game when everybody in the world knew the Falcons were going to be throwing the football because they were as far behind as they did, and Eagles teed off and got to Matt Ryan a couple of times. So there's a context to all of this. Pro Football Focus doesn't attempt to use context. Every play is the same play according to Pro Football Focus. That's why some of the times when they come out with grades, I go, really? Did you guys actually watch the game?
Yeah, and you know what? It's clear they watched the game. I mean, but you're right. If that's how they're doing it, then a play when you're down 41-21 in the fourth quarter means the same as 0-0, and that just shouldn't be right. And, I think anybody who's played, coached, watched can tell you, there isn't such thing as garbage time. Like, I always use this as an example. And I've told Tiki Barber this because he is a coworker of mine. And I said, Tiki, you remember the game against the Eagles in 2004 when T.O. had the 3-touchdown game? He goes, yeah, I had 125 yards that game. I'm like, yeah, okay, Tiki. I hope you do know you had an 85-yard touchdown run when the Eagles were up 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. Well, stats are stats. I said, yeah, but again, you were stopped that entire game. You weren't really a factor. You were a factor when Sam Rayburn was in the game. So, it's one of those, I had a 100-yard game. I'm like, yeah, you did, but, it's – and I get it. I mean, a really good year in 2004, but that's one of those where I like to put things in perspective a bit. And, I think that's how Pro Football Focus should do it. But, again, I get it. It used to be their grades wouldn't be up till about noon, 3 o'clock the next day. And they'd be like, oh, I'm curious to see what they rated. Now they're up like almost not immediately after the game, but they were up Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. So I'm thinking, okay, they're trying to get them out. I get it, for context and for clicks and for people who have a subscription like me to go look at them. And I look at them for every game when I'm watching the highlights or whatever, or I'm fast forwarding to a certain part on TV. I'm like, okay, what are they seeing? So yeah, context is definitely important. I will say that. But, there's just some of them where it's like they make a lot of sense and some of them where you shake your head. Javon Hargrave, yes. Landon Dickerson, he played bad. And, it's okay. How bad are they going to grade? I think it was in the 20s Landon Dickerson was. Last week it was a 4, which is really, really bad. And maybe that's why the Eagles are considering switching Landon Dickerson to the left guard. Maybe he's just more comfortable there. And, again, I'm not writing off Landon Dickerson by any means, but when I do my stock up, stock down report, oh man, his stock is pretty much at an all-time low.
Right, and a lot of it has to do with he just hasn't gotten up to speed yet. Eagle fans shouldn't panic. I don't believe the Eagles are panicking, going, "Oh, what'd we do? We could have wasted a second-round pick." No, they still have a lot of confidence in the kid, but there are growing pains, and they're growing through them right now. I want to get back to the quarterback conversation because we got Johnny Mac's take on it. I need yours now. Yeah, we know that Deshaun Watson is still eligible to be traded. We have the time up until the trade deadline when he can be traded. But then after that, he is locked into the Texans until the offseason. The speculation this week nationally, and when I said that with John, when I said nobody's brought up Deshaun Watson, I was talking about the local media. I was talking about Eagle fans on WIP or wherever else you believe that you get on our stream here on Birds 365. I don't think either Monday or Tuesday one person streamed, hey, any chance we can get our hands on Deshaun Watson? He had been kind of pushed to the back burner. If Chris Sims brought him up, more power to him. If my buddy Jay Glazer brought him up, more power to him too. One of the things that was brought up was maybe the Texans are starting to scale back their ask price for Deshaun Watson. Why do I have trouble believing that? If they had this high ask price on Deshaun Watson, they're now going to accept less because there are less games left in this season for a team that wants to acquire him? Really? That the Texans would say, well, we can't get as much because we're not giving them as much. I don't buy that. If anything, I would think the teams that would be willing to jump in and trade for Deshaun Watson are a little bit more desperate because they've gotten off to a slow start, because they realize the quarterback they have is not good enough. I would be upping my asking price rather than rolling back my asking price. That seems to strike me as to not make football sense. NFL 2021 since. Do you think that reporting is accurate? That and again, in the Eagles' case, it all comes down to would Deshaun Watson say, "Okay, I'll go to Philadelphia," which we don't know that he would, which kind of makes this a very hypothetical question I'm asking Jeff Kerr. Does that make sense to you that the Texans would actually be something triggered in them where they said, all right, maybe our asking price is too great. We need to scale it back a little bit?
Jody, I thought the same way you did. I'm like, to me, it doesn't even look like Deshaun Watson's like a problem right now. He's kind of all to the side. He practices, I should say. He's individually throwing a football with someone. It's not even like someone on the coaching staff. I think it's someone that, like an equipment manager or something. I think that's what he's doing. I mean, David Coley gets asked about him every week, and it's, well, he's going to be inactive this week. Okay, and then they drop it. Like that's the only time he gets asked about it. So again, I don't get why you would lower your price, because this is the situation I'm looking at. The Miami Dolphins still don't know what they have in Tua Tagovailoa. The only thing they know is he gets hurt a lot. And I think it was Joe Shad and Armando Salguero who pointed out, they're like, look, if there's anything the Miami Dolphins know, this guy gets hurt. And that could be incentive to trade for Deshaun Watson. Here's the other conundrum people don't understand. Look at the 2022 quarterback class. Everybody hyped up Spencer Rattler. Not playing well. Sam Howell. Not playing well. Malik Willis. Liberty. Okay, I think he's a really good prospect. Do Dolphins really are they really going to be able to get a Malik Willis knowing that there are quarterback needy teams in this league? No. So he's out. Carson Strong, another one. I like him. I watched 2 Nevada games this year. I like him. I don't know if he's a top 10 pick yet. I just don't. It may be a draft where it's defensive line, offensive line heavy. And, there's a couple solid receivers in there. And, again, things are still playing out. But the quarterback class is not looking good. Why would you lower your offer right now when you have a proven commodity? And there is going to be a team in this league, and maybe Miami, could be Philadelphia, but Deshaun doesn't want to go there. We don't care about the problems Deshaun Watson faces. We'll deal with them when we have to deal with them. We just got a top 5 quarterback in the National Football League.
Right. The quarterback that's actually looked better than any in college football this week. A key game, Eagle fans. I said this on the show, back on Tuesday. You do want to watch Alabama against Mississippi on Saturday. I think it's a 3:30 start. CBS probably.
Yeah, CBS game.
Matt Corral has played as well as any quarterback in college football. I would make him the leader in the clubhouse for the Heisman Trophy so far. And if he ever beats Alabama this week, oh, yes, he will be the leader in the Heisman Trophy running. I can guarantee you that. The kid's got a wicked arm, and he may be the first quarterback chosen in the upcoming draft. That's an Eagle note and or Texan note if they're going to be, they think, up there for the number 1 pick, and they've got to get themselves a quarterback. Although the game was on because it was a national game. What do you think of Davis Mills, the Houston quarterback? Because that's a part of this whole conversation, how much they're going to get in return for Deshaun Watson. If they think they need a quarterback, do they have a higher grade on Tua Tagovailoa right now than the Dolphins do? Maybe. Do they even think they need a quarterback, or do they think they need everything else other than the quarterback because they have their quarterback? I know it's a very small sample size. Did you like what you saw out of David Mills?
I'll say this. I think the Houston Texans did a much better job at preparing Davis Mills to start on 3 days than Urban Meyer has with Trevor Lawrence or Robert Saleh or Mike LaFleur has with Zach Wilson. And again, look, I got to put it in perspective here. I don't think Zach Wilson has played as bad as people make him out to be. It's just the Jets are the Jets. It's the way it is. But the Texans are bad too. And Davis Mills did not look absolutely horrible. I was like, okay, there might be something here. Again, you got to see more. We'll see how he does on 10 days rest. But they seem to have a plan for this guy. And look, they weren't going to beat Carolina, but he was not the reason why they lost that game. He was efficient. he ran the game plan the way they wanted to run the game plan. He was basically a game manager, and that's fine. Sometimes I think you got to do that with your rookie quarterbacks. And Urban Meyer definitely isn't doing that with Trevor Lawrence. And look, I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be fine in the NFL. But everybody talks about seven picks, and I'm like, well, okay, he's a young quarterback. They're slinging the football around. They're down the lot. They are getting better every week. I will say that about Jacksonville. They're still a bad football team, but they're getting better. But Davis Mills, it's compared to all the other rookie quarterbacks this week, if you had to rank them, he's probably one or two, just based on not turning the football over.
That's why I asked the question, because in comparison to all those other rookie quarterbacks, I didn't check the Pro Football Focus grades, which, again, sometimes I question, but I know what I saw, and I actually came away a little impressed with the young man. All right, he's Jeff Kerr. I'm Jody McDonald. We'll come back. We'll make the conversation more about the Eagles quarterback, Jalen Hurts, when we come back, not who's coming in to replace him, unless, of course, we start to look at the Eagle bench, which I know there are some people out there that think that is only weeks away from happening. We'll continue to talk Eagles right here on Birds 365.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the memories. Go for the view that goes on forever. Go for the bubbles in your bathtub and in your drink. Go to bed whenever you want. Or don't. Go for him. Go for her. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass. Free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit. The glass is for cocktails, right?
It's for this, and that.
Is the length of the glass equal to your...
You betcha.
But is it made out of...
Glass?
Okay, but is the rip...
Smooth?
Will you stop doing...
That?
I'm the professional here.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. One free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. All from the company that's highly awarded. 0 carbs, 0 sugar, and deliciously tasting vodka. So good, it just disappears.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
7 on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
When it comes to the fight against insurance companies, large corporations, and the healthcare industry, injured victims are always the underdog. But that doesn't worry us. At Messon Associates, we're an injury law firm from Philadelphia, and we come to fight. Our clients know that they've got representation with a chip on its shoulder, and it's the same chip that makes Philly the toughest city in the country. Call 215-568-3500 or visit us online at messalaw.com. Messon Associates, the toughest injury firm in Philadelphia.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the game. Go for the hits. Go for the fans. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
We are your Birds 365 guys. My partner today will be Jeff Kerr, CBS Sports. I'm Jody McDonald. Thanks for tuning in here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. We still got an hour to continue to talk about the Birds with you here on a Thursday, leading into a matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs. Ouch. Andy Reid coming back to town. Someone on the stream did note that could very well be Andy's last trip into the vet as the coach of the Kansas City Chiefs. What would that entail? The Kansas City Chiefs come in basically every 6 years. That you play a team in the other division, other conference, once every 3 years, or is it once every 4? No, it's once every 4 years. So it'd be 8 years down the road before Andy Reid would come back. Damn, is Andy going to be coaching 8 more years? If he is, and I'll tell you this, I wouldn't be completely shocked. Andy's had a lot to deal with. His driver's license says what it says. I think Andy is kind of a football lifer. I think we've learned that about him, despite all the issues that he, like all of us, have away from our jobs. Andy has always dealt with them, and he's always shouldered on and continued to coach for the last couple of decades. I think the same would be said going forward as well. But there's a possibility that Andy Reid is not coaching 8 years from now when the Kansas City Chiefs would be scheduled to be back here in Philadelphia. Does that mean anything? Andy Reid coming back here to Philadelphia. He spent a lot of time here. Yes, he didn't get a Super Bowl, but his protege, Doug Peterson, did here for Philadelphia. What does Andy Reid returning to Philadelphia for perhaps the last time mean to you, Jeff Kerr?
I think this is definitely worth something bringing up. I thought about this earlier this week too, and I couldn't get a question in on the Chiefs media session yesterday. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Obviously, there were Philly reporters in yesterday, so it was a little tough. But overall, they weren't in for Patrick Mahomes though, and Mahomes basically said, they were talking about Reid's health and everything that happened this week, and he said, he was a little worried at first, but it was taken care of, and he basically said, I know this, Andy loves coaching us, and he loves coaching this football team, and he don't see him anywhere else. And Chiefs players I've talked to during the Super Bowl, both Super Bowls, this year even, they don't think Andy's going anywhere for a while because of the situation he's in. And I really can't blame him. Really, if Andy Reid would go anywhere, I think Eric Bieniemy would get the job. But again, I just don't see that happening anytime soon, because this is like, football is Andy Reid's getaway. And I always felt this, now look, 2029 is a long way away. I think Andy would be 71. It's not out of the realm of possibility. I mean, obviously now with the 17th game, there could be a way the Eagles and Chiefs fall in the same place in the standings. It's so hard to explain how the 17th game works, because it goes from a rotation from 2019, and next year it'd be 2020, and the following year it'd be 2021. So there's an opportunity for him to coach in Philadelphia in 2023 or 2027 again. But basically on where the Eagles and Chiefs are, I just don't see that happening. But overall, I mean, it could be. And I say this as someone who grew up idolizing Andy Reid, as a fan of the Eagles. I don't think they do enough for this head coach. And I know Jeffrey Lurie respects him. And I know Andy Reid holds Philadelphia in very high regards and how well they've treated him. But I think Andy Reid should be mentioned a heck of a lot more than he is. I know he's still coaching. I know he's with another team. But there are a lot of people who would not be Eagles fans if it wasn't for Andy Reid and what he did for this city. And I get sick and tired of people telling me on Twitter all the time, he didn't win a Super Bowl, or he choked in big games. I'm like, you know what my dad always used to tell me when I would lose a big game? Well, you have to be good enough to get to the big game before you lose the big game. And I always took that to heart. It's, it makes a lot of sense. It does. I'm sorry. The 13 to 17-year-old Jeff Kerr absolutely loved the Eagles making deep playoff runs into January. Every single year. He beat the Cowboys every single year. He would beat the Giants every single year. I enjoyed the heck out of Andy Reid and everything he done. And I can go back and forth on why the Eagles lost championship games. You can blame Andy Reid. You can blame Donovan McNabb. You can blame the defense. That's completely fine. However you want to slice it. But I will say this about Andy Reid. In my lifetime, there hasn't been a coach anywhere close to him. And I know Doug Pearson won a Super Bowl, but he could not sustain the level of success Andy Reid did. It is a shame Andy Reid could not win a championship here.
Agreed, because some people rate just short-term success over long-term success, short-term top-of-the-mountain success over long-term pretty high up the mountain success, and that's the dichotomy between Peterson and Andy Reid. I have not spoken to Andy Reid. I haven't had him on as a guest since he left Philadelphia. I did have him on when he was the Eagles head coach, but I've heard him do a bunch of interviews, some here in Philadelphia, some nationally, when the Eagles and Jeff Lurie have come up. And he always says, quote unquote, the right thing, that he loved his time here. And he appreciates Jeff Lurie and the chance that he gave him, and the kind of guy that he is, and a charitable individual, and all those things. Because it's the right thing to say. And Andy Reid is pretty smart. I always thought he handled himself well, except for it's on me. I got to coach him up. I got to do better. He took all the bullets for everybody, which we'd all rolled our eyes on because we didn't really believe that. And we don't believe Andy believed that. But that's what he said. And that's the point I'm trying to make. Andy will do, quote unquote, the right thing. He always has. And he continues to do so. What do you think his feelings are about Jeffrey Lurie? I think for the most part, they're good. But he did kind of give Doug Peterson the bum rush out of town. And that's one of Andy's guys. Do you think his sentiments about the Eagles, specifically management, specifically Jeff Lurie, has changed of late?
Yeah, and this comes back to my point. I just don't think the Eagles respect Andy Reid enough. And I really do hope if he does beat them Sunday. And I know Chiefs fans are a little, I don't know why they're worried about the Philadelphia Eagles right now, but they are. I hope if Andy Reid wins this game Sunday, becoming the first head coach ever to win 100 games with two different franchises, the Eagles acknowledge him. And I have said this on Twitter before. I've said it on a bunch of platforms and on radio spots. I hope the Eagles acknowledge it because of all he did for the franchise. Because if they don't, that kind of tells me a little bit of where they are as an ownership group. And I think there may be a little bit of it. Because, look, they did not give Doug a chance to fix this mess. They didn't. They just basically said, okay, you had a losing season, you're out. We're going with our guy. And that's fine. I don't know how Andy Reid's relationship is with Howie Roseman. I know Roseman's been there pretty much almost the entire time Reid's been there, although not in the position of power he is now. He was toward the end of it. And, you know, Joe Banner, Andy Reid, and Jeffrey Lurie, that was as lethal a combination as you could find outside the New England Patriots for a lot of years. And I don't know how Andy Reid felt with the Joe Banner episode. It just seemed like once Banner was gone, Reid was gone soon after. I think Andy Reid really likes to build close relationships. He has a really close one with Chiefs GM Brett Veach, who, by the way, was in the Eagles. He was with the Eagles. And so was Jason Litt. They were there. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers GM. They all were there when the Eagles were at the height of their powers under Andy Reid. So I look at that. They're really close. He's close to Mr. Hunt, obviously Chiefs owner, CEO, close to him. It's one of those where I feel like there might be a little resentment, but he's never going to say it because I still don't like the way he was fired. And it was time to go. But I still look at it as that game against the Giants, and they lost 42-7. I'm like, that team quit. That team flat out quit. That's why I got so mad when Deshaun Jackson flipped out on Chip Kelly and LaShawn. I'm like, whoa, you asked for this. Don't lose 42-7 in a year you finished 4-12. Because, I actually thought Andy had a chance of staying until that game. And, that's where I always would defend Chip. I'm like, okay, you want to get on this guy, that's fine. I don't think he's a great coach either. But you can't sit here and complain about the guy when the guy you loved is gone because you guys didn't want to show up for a meaningless Week 17 game against your division rival.
Let me hop in there. Do you really believe that the blowout nature of that game was the reason that Jeff Lurie pulled the plug? Before that game was ever played, I believed Andy Reid was going into the last game he was ever going to coach as a Philadelphia Eagle. So I don't know that the players quitting in that game really changed the decision that the Eagles were sitting on. I think it was gone well before that. Now, if you want to say they underachieved, they quit the whole year, okay, we can debate that a little bit, but I don't really believe that last game cost Andy Reid his tenure as an Eagles coach.
I think it was the final nail in the coffin. I'll say that. I'm with you. So I'll say this. I didn't think he was coming back, but I'm just, any inkling you might have had on bringing him back, and maybe Andy was out the door at this point too, because Kansas City basically hired him like 18 hours after he got fired.
I don't think he was crestfallen because he was no longer going to be the coach of the Eagles. Put it that way.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I agree there. And it was, but if I'm a knee-jerk reaction guy, and you're thinking about, what they played hard these last couple of games with a rookie quarterback and Nick Foles, and it's okay. We had a lot of injuries, and this whole dream team experiment was a disaster and all that. And over the death of his son and everything else that was going on. But you still had that creep. It's like, okay, yeah, we're bad, but they are playing hard for him. At least somewhat that's how it looked. And, we're starting to see a little bit of progress, and then boom, you lose to a terrible Giants team like that. It's like, okay, yeah, this isn't going to work anymore. I mean, that could have been it because he was basically fired right after the game. I mean, but the writing was on the wall, but those guys did not help the situation.
That's fair.
I'll say that.
If you want to call the players on the carpet, that's certainly within your rights. I think they did roll over in that final game, but I think that story was already written. All right, so Sunday, Andy Reid honored at the link. How, when, where, video tribute. When does it have to be done? At 12, 35, 40? You don't want to be doing it 2 minutes before the game because that's Eagle time. You're supposed to be getting pumped up for the potential upset of taking down Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. So you want to do the right thing. How you go about it and the timing of it is pretty important. How do you handle it, Jeff Kerr?
Yeah, and Andy Reid's not going to make a big deal out of it because he already said he's not going to make a big deal out of it. He always says, I enjoyed my time there. I respect your. I mean, when do you do it exactly? Do you do it at like noon when no one's there? I think the appropriate time, if I was the Eagles, again, I'm not an Eagles PR, but I would wait. If he wins, I would do it after the game.
After.
For the 100th win. Because that's fair. That's more than fair game. Halftime's not going to make any sense. I mean, you can if you want, but if they beat that, I even think if they don't beat, I think you acknowledge Andy Reid. I just think you do. That's when you do it. I don't think you do it like at 12:30. I'll say that.
I think the only time you can do it is pregame. I don't think you can do it at halftime and after the game. If the Chiefs roll the Eagles 40-20, kind of like what the Cowboys just did to the Eagles, and after the game, you're going to throw up a tribute to the coach and just kick your tails all over your home stadium, that's not going to go over well. And, oh, by the way, there's a whole bunch of people that are going to be long gone from that stadium that didn't want to stick around to see Andy, even if they knew it was coming, and Andy Reid tribute. Eagles are down 3 touchdowns again. See you later, bye. I'm on Packer Avenue. I'm not sticking around for it. I think the only time you can do it is before the game starts. You can't do it in the middle of the game because the game could be hanging in the balance, and Eagle fans are going to want to know about what's happening here in the second half. Can we actually pull this upset? Oh, no, I think you got to do it pregame. The question is, what time? How close to kickoff? Yeah, they could do it at 11:30.
No one's going to be there.
People, the people that work in Lincoln Financial Field and Eagles pregame show on radio, TV, or whatever else could be there to see it. But you got to do it sometime between 12 and 1. The question is, what is the perfect time? And I'll go so far as to ask you this. How long should a taped video tribute be? I think you'd want to intermesh Eagle stuff with Chief stuff. You got to acknowledge he won his Super Bowl with Kansas City, so you got to get a picture of him on the podium with the trophy afterwards. Yeah, we got one. If we had never had one, that might have been a tough thing to do, to edit in, Andy Reid with his hands on a trophy. Well, Jeff Lurie had his hands on the trophy courtesy of Doug Peterson. So you can swallow that and do that. How long do you think you make that video tribute?
I'd do probably maybe a minute and a half. I mean, because there were a lot of good times with Philadelphia, obviously. And, you could point out to the 4 consecutive NFC East titles, the 5 NFC East overall, the 5 conference championship games, the Super Bowl. I mean, you definitely can acknowledge the 2004 NFC Championship. I definitely would do that because the Eagles made a really, really big deal about that before they ended up winning the Super Bowl, which obviously that trumps everything else. But, I would give him pretty much the Dick Vermeil treatment. I mean, I know the Eagles organization, they have a heck of a lot of respect for Dick Vermeil, and I think that's how you got to do it with Andy Reid. You do a minute, you do a minute and a half, do some of the acknowledgement of the Chiefs. And I think in that, I agree with you, Joe. You showed Doug Peterson because that is an Andy Reid disciple. He won a Super Bowl. And, look, I don't think the Eagles will ever assemble a coaching staff like they did, like the 99 team, who has head coaches around the end. Everybody goes, well, that team was 5-11. I'm like, look at the staff, though. Like, that staff is just absolutely loaded with talent across the board. I mean, a lot of them are head coaches now. And, yeah, it's one of those where I would do a minute and a half, honestly. I think that's good enough to acknowledge him. And, again, this is not like you can boo him all you want. The guy's the top 10 head coach of all time. If he gets another Super Bowl, he may even be in the conversation top 7. But he's getting close to, I think he passed Curly Lambeau for head coach, or maybe he's right there. But if it wasn't for Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, I think Andy Reid would be on a much higher pedestal than he is. And some people are starting to put him there just because of the sustained success, because people are saying what I've been saying for 2 decades. The Patriot way is the Tom Brady way. It's not the Bill Belichick way.
Yeah, if we and it'd be a good week to do it, but I think we need to stick with the Eagles and Chiefs coming up, seeing as Brady and Belichick are going mano a mano on Sunday night. Different place, different format. We could talk about that for an hour and a half, as a matter of fact. And I think there are a lot of guys, Andy Reid just being one of them, that you could write a sentence that says, if not for Bill Belichick and the Patriots, comma, ... There's a whole bunch of guys with the quarterback. If not for Tom Brady and the Patriots, ... There's a whole bunch of guys whose evaluation as to where they stand in the NFL would be different, but the Patriots did what they did. Belichick did what he did. Brady has done what he's done. I don't think it's fair to them to broach it that way. One last thing about the coaching staff that you mentioned, Andy Reid's coaching staff from way back when. And I remember we had Jeff Lurie and Howie Roseman on WIP, myself and my old partner, Glenn Macnow. And it was Jeffrey who said one of the things that really impressed them in their meeting with Andy when they decided to hire him was he came in with binders of every single individual coach he would hire if he were to get a job and have a staff, and here's the reason why, and he broke it down, and they were wowed by how prepared he was for putting together a coaching staff. And they allowed him to do that, and damn if you didn't put, as you said, one of the best coaching staff together. Now, 20 years after the fact, we can look back and go, damn, how good was that coaching staff? I've mentioned this with John on the air here on Birds 365 before. Do you think the Eagles were trying to recapture that magic with Nick Sirianni? Because Sirianni had more say over this year's coaching staff than Doug Peterson ever did his entire time, even after he won a Super Bowl. They kept the staff intact. Now, I don't know that Doug wanted to make massive changes and that he fought over that with Howie Roseman and Jeff Lurie. I doubt that's even the case. But we know the original staff that Doug put together, a lot of guys sticking around, organizational influence. I think a little bit was Doug's indifference that, okay, we'll just coach him up. I don't think he was as motivated by it as I know he wasn't as motivated by it as Andy Reid was. Do you think Sirianni helped to get the job here because the Eagles were looking to reproduce Andy Reid again here in town?
I think they were. I think they've always been trying to reproduce Andy Reid, especially at their Chip Kelly days, since Andy Reid left. And look, if you remember, you talked about the binders thing in '99, and they made a big deal about that. I think that's partially how Ray Rhodes got the job. He was recommended by Mike Holmgren, because Mike Holmgren was with him for years. I know there was always that proposed rift between them, and there wasn't. It's just Ray wanted a better opportunity to become a head coach and went back to the 49ers. And he came to 5 regards for Holmgren, and he was prepared for an interview, and he crushed the interview. And Andy Reid crushed the interview. And, Ray Rhodes put together a pretty good coaching staff when he was in Philadelphia. And Andy did the same. And I think, I actually think that that's true. Like, they said to Nick, hey, look, you were prepared. You can build your coaching staff. And, I think he's had a couple good hires. I mean, I do like the Shane Steichen hire. I really do. I really like the Jonathan Gannon hire. I agree with John McMullen. I think down the line, he's potentially going to be a head coach in this league. There's a lot of coaches on this coaching staff I see a lot of potential with. That's why I want to see the growth of this team this season. It looks really bad now, but is it going to be like Andy Reid in 1999? Because remember, that team was terrible too. They weren't good. And, they had a couple heartbreaking, soul-crushing losses early in the season. They got blown out a couple times, but then they would beat a better team like Dallas. For no reason, they would beat them. Or, they would take a team like the Giants who were better than them to overtime. And then they would beat a team like Washington, who won the division that year. And, they beat the Rams and the Patriots. They knocked the Patriots out of the playoffs at the end of 1999. Andy Reid is responsible for Bill Belichick being the Patriots head coach. He beat him. He beat Pete Carroll, got him fired, and everything else snowballed. So, again, it's one of those where I think Nick Sirianni, you need to see the improvement. You need to see Nick Sirianni just build this team going forward. And, that's why I think the worst may have hit, but I want to see them improve this week and improve throughout the 17-game season. I'm going to judge Nick Sirianni and him being a head coach by November and December of how much this team has improved.
He is Jeff Kerr. I am Jody McDonald. We are the Birds 365 guys as we lead up to the showdown with the Chiefs and the return of Andy Reid here to Philadelphia. How will Andy be handled? More importantly, how will Andy Reid handle the Philadelphia Eagles? I think that should be the biggest concern as of right now. Want to get a Kansas City perspective. We're hoping to punch up Matt Verderame from Fansided, who writes for them for the entire National Football League Outstanding NFL columnist, but is a Kansas City guy. Grew up in Kansas City. I asked him, I didn't even know where Matt was living, so I texted him the other day. I said, you're a Central Time Zone guy. You're a Kansas City guy. I said, Jody, I grew up in Kansas City. Living in Chicago now these days, but I grew up in Kansas City as a Chiefs fan because he oftentimes does write about the Chiefs, and on social media, he's always commenting on the Chiefs. So I thought he'd be a good guy to get on in the week that Andy Reid returns here to Philadelphia. So we're hoping to hear from Matt Verderame of Fansided. He's scheduled to join us next here on Birds 365.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the memories. Go for the view that goes on forever. Go for the bubbles in your bathtub and in your drink. Go to bed whenever you want. Or don't. Go for him. Go for her. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass. Free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit. Glass is for cocktails, right?
It's for this, and that.
Is the length of the glass equal to your...
You betcha.
But is it made out of...
Glass?
Okay, but is the rip...
Smooth?
Will you stop doing...
That?
I'm the professional here.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. One free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. All from the company that's highly awarded. 0 carbs, 0 sugar, and deliciously tasting vodka. So good, it just disappears.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
7 on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
When it comes to the fight against insurance companies, large corporations, and the healthcare industry, injured victims are always the underdog. But that doesn't worry us. At Messa & Associates, we're an injury law firm from Philadelphia, and we come to fight. Our clients know that they've got representation with a chip on its shoulder, and it's the same chip that makes Philly the toughest city in the country. Call 215-568-3500 or visit us online at messalaw.com. Messa & Associates, the toughest injury firm in Philadelphia.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the game. Go for the hits. Go for the fans. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
A free Kansas City Now, episode of Bird 365. Jeff Kerr sitting by my side today. Jody Mack here with you. I keep smiling face. At some point over the next 20-some-odd minutes. From fan-sided NFL columnist Matt Verderame here with us on Birds 365. How are you, MV?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Good. Appreciate you giving us a couple minutes of your time. Andy Reid left last week's loss to the Chargers immediately after the game, went to the hospital via ambulance. We're told could have been dehydration, overabundance of caution. Andy Reid going to be good to go this week? What further information have you got about Andy Reid and his physical health?
Yeah, the word is that it is dehydration or was dehydration. He left the hospital on Monday. He was back at the facility on Tuesday and working and getting ready for the Eagles. So seems fine. He spoke to the media yesterday as he normally does for his Wednesday press conference. He didn't look any worse for the wear, didn't sound any worse. So yeah, all systems apparently go as he heads back to a very important place for him.
Hey, Matt, one thing I noticed in the Andy Reid press conference was there were a couple Philly guys in there and yesterday. And obviously he got the questions about his time in Philly because obviously he's facing the Eagles this week. And I thought they were very generic answers, but you know how Andy is. He's very sincere, too, with a lot of stuff. And one thing I thought was interesting was he thought the Eagles were in good hands with Nick Sirianni. Do you think that's more of Andy just being respectful toward Philadelphia, or is that just coach speak at this point?
Well, look, he says the same thing every week about every team. That doesn't mean maybe he does believe that about Nick Sirianni, but it's hard to tell because I remember last year when they played the Jets and they were 21-point favorites at home. And he came out and was like, this is a great team. They're really well coached. We have all the respect in the world. I mean, and it's just, you're sitting there thinking like, you could play your backups and win this game. And they ended up winning like 40-9 or something, which, by the way, that is the last time the Chiefs have won by more than one score. So, and that was week 8 of last year.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
That being said, is it this Chiefs defense? We know that at least last week, turnovers killed them, 2 interceptions, 4 fumbled. That was the most indicative stat that came out of that game. But is the Chiefs defense a little overrated that they allow teams to stick around, that the offense can score points, yet the defense gives it back in I don't want to say in droves, but in a good enough amount that it keeps games close? Are we giving this Chiefs defense, I'll raise my hand, guilty as charged, maybe it's because I'm a Spagnuolo fan, a little bit too much credit that they're not as good as advertised?
Oh, right now they're terrible. Now, I do think they should be better, and they will get better at some point here. They have a lot of talent defensively, but they have not shown it. Now, I will say their linebackers might be the slowest linebackers in football. So you can take advantage.
Have you seen the Eagle linebackers?
I know it's going to be quite a matchup of the second levels this weekend. Now, if you can match up a running back or a tight end against Chiefs linebacker, you're going to win every time because they can't cover anybody. Can't cover, they can't run. Anthony Hitchens is a good player, but he's somewhat limited in coverage. And Nick Bolton, their rookie second-round pick, he's very good coming downhill against the run. He moves like a nose tackle in space. So, look, I think the rest of the defense, the other 2 levels do have a lot of talent, but they've not played up to it. There's been a lot of blown assignments. I do think it'll get better when, I don't know. Last year, they were the worst defense in football in the red zone. The worst. Gave 75%. This year, in the red zone, they've given up 11 touchdowns on 12 trips. And the only time they didn't give up a touchdown was called back on a penalty. So they have been horrific. If Philadelphia can get inside the 20-yard line, they're going to score a touchdown because the Chiefs have no answers. Most of those drives I haven't even seen third down. So that it's been bad.
Yeah, Matt, you actually pointed out, so I got pivoted on this question here because I know the linebackers have been terrible, but everybody seems to think teams are scheming up the Chiefs better, and they're finding ways to beat Patrick Mahomes. Me personally, I'm not seeing that. I'm just seeing the team that just gives up a lot of points, and Patrick Mahomes has to come from behind all the time, which I'm shocked they see this. Patrick Mahomes' QB rating is so much higher when he's coming from behind than it is when the game's tied or when they have the lead. So
Right.
Do you think teams are scheming them up like better? Or?
No, nobody has stopped them this year except them.
Yeah.
They've turned the ball over 6 times.
Last 13 possessions.
Yeah. I think all year they've punted like 3 times. Maybe it's 4. I keep seeing that like all week. I've seen the Chargers. They really slowed them down. The Chiefs had 433 yards and 33 first downs. Like the Chargers did nothing to slow them down that game. Mahomes threw a ball that hit off a receiver's hands in the red zone. There would have been a touchdown and got picked off. Then later in the game, he threw an awful pass that got picked off.
Fourth one, yeah.
They fumbled twice inside the Chargers' 30-yard line. Like, the Chargers didn't slow down. And by the way, the same is true of the Ravens. The Chiefs were winning that game the whole game. They were going up and down the field at will, and then Mahomes throws a pick, Clyde Edwards-Helaire fumbles, and they lose the game. I think if there's any criticism of the offense right now, it's probably a little bit of hero ball with them, if that's the right term. Like I think sometimes they're so great offensively they get bored, and I know that almost sounds like an excuse, but if you watch them, I think like that really, like the first interception Mahomes threw on Sunday, he had Marcus Kemp, who's a reserve receiver, was in the game because they went spread and he happened to be in the game. He had Marcus Kemp wide open, like nobody within 10 yards of Marcus Kemp, and he threw a no-look pass to him. There's no reason to do it. Like he had him wide open, but he did it because I think they get bored. They're just so effective all the time. It was like, well, let's make this a little more fun than it needs to be. The throw was a little bit behind Kemp. Should have caught it, but it hit him in the hands, bounces up. Asante Samuel Jr. picks it. Look, if they don't turn the ball over, they'll score 35 points against anybody they play this year. But sometimes they get too big for their britches. They make mistakes.
Fair enough. Let me ask you about Edwards-Helaire, who last year did not have a fumble.
Right.
181 carries, 0 fumbles. This year he's got 2 fumbles in 44, one of which was huge as per the time of the game against the Ravens, which allowed the Ravens to take the lead late and beat the Chiefs, stick their first loss on them.
Right.
An issue, a coincidence? Guys just made good defensive plays. You've seen Edwards-Helaire during his entire time in the league, which is now just 1 year and 3 games. But is this something that the Kansas City Chiefs should be worried about?
I don't think so. I mean, he didn't. I'm pretty sure he also never fumbled at LSU. I don't think he ever fumbled the ball once in college. So, he's not a guy who's a history of it. Sometimes stuff happens. Now, I will say that the one against Baltimore was egregious because in that spot the only thing you can't do is fumble that ball. Like that's the only thing you can't do. You're running into a box with the Ravens had 11 guys in the box in that play, and he was carrying the ball with one hand. I mean, that's you deserve what you get for doing that. But no, I don't think they're concerned about it. Like they're not a team, even as aggressive as Mahomes is. They don't turn the ball over typically under Andy Reid. Like they've never had that problem. Now, obviously, for years they had Alex Smith at quarterback, that being part of the reason. But even in the 3 years Mahomes has been the starter, like they've never had a fumbling problem. Mahomes has never been a guy who throws a lot of picks. So this has been new for them. Like this is not something, and some of it's a little bit, just weird. I mean, they've had some plays where give the Chargers credit, like just bang, bang, like perfect, helmet on the ball, hand on the ball. But it's been, I think it's more flukish than it is like an epidemic with this team. But if they do it again against Philadelphia, people are going to be screaming in Kansas City.
Matt, one thing I will say about the Chiefs, I am been very impressed with this offensive line so far. Entirely new comment. I thought they were great on Sunday. And Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith, they look like bargains at this point for what they do, where they drafted them.
I really think those two guys in particular, look, Thuney's been great, right? He comes over, huge money. Lucas Niang, the right tackle, he had a little bit of a rough time with Bosa, who doesn't, but he's been very good on the whole all season long. He opted out last year, so technically it's his rookie season. And then Orlando Brown, they got him, and he had a little bit of a back and forth with Garrett week 1, struggled a little, but other than that, he's been locked in. He's been fantastic. But you're right about Humphrey and Smith. Like they got Humphrey in the 2nd round, Smith in the 6th. Smith fell because of blood clot issues he had at Tennessee. Trey Smith looks like he's going to be an all-pro. I mean, it's a lot of hyperbole for 3 games. I get that, but he has been unbelievable. I mean, they will line him up one-on-one with like guys like Brandon Williams in Baltimore, and he just destroys them. I mean, it's been really impressive. Humphrey is more of a technician. You can tell he was a wrestler in his younger days, but he's been really, really good. Only he's given up one pressure in 3 games, moves guys. It's going to be a really interesting matchup watching Hargrave and Cox go against that interior. It's going to be that for years was the Chiefs' biggest weakness. They couldn't block inside. Now I think it's their biggest strength. So it'll be very interesting to see that back and forth because obviously those two guys are playing great football.
Matty, need your take on the move that the Chiefs made in the last 24, 48 hours. And that's the signing of Josh Gordon, who got reinstated by the league. We know Josh Gordon's story. Tremendous talent. Just continued to fall off the wagon.
Right.
The Patriots took a chance. The Seahawks take a chance. Now the Chiefs take a chance. We get it that if you can keep him on the straight and narrow, you got yourself a hell of a talent, and you got one for a very inexpensive price. Is it worth the time, the effort, the potential downside? I don't know how big it is, but he could become a distraction. Were you surprised the Chiefs did it, and why will it work here when it has run its course in other places before?
Yeah, well, it very well may not work. I think bring him in because DeMarcus Robinson and McCall Hardman have been guys and nothing more for years on end now. I mean, Hardman's a little bit more of a guy with some upside, but this year has been very obvious what teams have done with them. They've doubled Tyreek Hill on every play and made Kelsey beat him, which Kelsey has beaten everybody to this point. He's averaging 100 yards a game, but Hill had 197 yards in the first game. He went nuts. Since then, he has like 60 yards. And teams are saying, basically, go ahead with DeMarcus Robinson and McCall Hardman, beat us. And they have not been able to do it. Now, that all said, it has not slowed down this offense, which just continues to go up and down the field. But the Chiefs are looking for somebody who they can put opposite of Tyreek Hill, who if he's going against your second or third corner and that guy's not getting any help, he can kill him. And that's why the Chiefs went out and got Josh Gordon. Now, he won't play this week. I don't think he'll play next week. But they are working him up to speed. I was told, look, once he gets a little bit of the playbook underneath him, once he gets his football conditioning, he'll be good to go, elevate him quickly. So I would think maybe like week 6, they play at Washington. That might be a game where you might see him. But I don't think there's any downside. You bring him in. If it doesn't work, he's on a practice squad contract. Fine. You move on. If he does work out, and look, he's not going to be 2013 Josh Gordon, but if he's 2018 Josh Gordon with 750 yards, like that's a big get for them because right now, other than Hill and Kelsey, there's no other guy that makes a defense sweat.
Yeah, Matt, and Joey brought up Josh Gordon. I wanted to bring him up too. Yesterday when they asked Patrick Mahomes about it, he basically said, he gave him the green light for this and definitely put in his input. Like, how much over the years now? I know it's gotten better, but how much over the years has Patrick Mahomes' influence been on what this Chiefs front office does?
Oh, he has input. I mean, he had a lot of input in them drafting Edwards Zelayer. So certainly he doesn't make the decision. Andy and Brett Veach, I think that's a pretty strong partnership going back. Obviously, both guys were in Philly for a very long time, and they trust each other. I think Andy is the guy in that building who ultimately, more than anybody else, has swings the biggest stick, so to speak. But Veach really does have quite a bit of power there, and I think those two will make the choice. That said, yeah, they're going to talk to their $500 million quarterback. I mean that's something that they believe in. They don't shy away from that. He's more than just their quarterback. In a lot of ways, he's almost like another CEO with them. So. I don't think they would have made the move if Mahomes wasn't confident in it. But look, Gordon, forgive me if I'm forgetting something, but most of his career, he's not been a guy who's been in a bunch of trouble because he's a bad guy. He's been in trouble because of substance abuse issues.
Yep.
So, I think it's a little bit different. And the Chiefs have brought in, the Chiefs have taken on all comers over the years. And I know in Philadelphia, Andy Reid would give guys second chances, third chances. It's kind of who he is. It's his MO. But with Gordon, I think it's really just about, hey, can you keep a guy in the straight and narrow? We'll see. We'll see how it shakes. But I don't blame them at all for trying it. If it doesn't work, nothing lost. If it does work, it's a huge addition.
All right. I'll readily admit this is looking at it through eagle-colored glasses. because Jalen Hurts is not quite Lamar Jackson. But he is a running quarterback who can make plays with his legs.
Yep.
And Lamar did put up 36 against them with a little help from Edwards-Helaire putting it on the ground. But he went for over 100, ran it in himself 2 times. Can Jalen Hurts with his legs cause problems for Chiefs, if not the way Lamar Jackson did, at least in some fashion?
Yeah, because if he gets to the second level, they won't tackle him. Yeah, absolutely. Listen, if Nick Sirianni doesn't run the ball a lot in this game, he's nuts. I'm not, and I don't believe in the whole, you got to run for X amount of yards to win, but you have to run the ball against Kansas City to some degree. You have to be able to, it takes time off the clock. You stay ahead of the sticks. The Chiefs pass rush has been awful this season. Awful. Chris Jones has been great. Other than him, they have nobody who can do anything. Frank Clark's always hurt. Even when he plays, has not been effective. He's missed 2 of the 3 games so far this year. Jaron Reed came in and was supposed to be a huge addition. I'm not exaggerating when I say I have literally not seen Jaron Reed in 3 games. He's on the field, you just never see him do anything. So they have struggled big time in that regard. However, we all know the Eagles are very banged up front. And this is the kind of game where Spagnuolo will blitz them at will if he's given the opportunity. If they get into spots where it's 2nd and 12, 2nd and 10, 3rd and 9, the one thing the Chiefs can do is play some man coverage. The Chiefs will blitz like crazy to try to get Hurts to make a mistake. So I think it's imperative. You got to hand the ball to Miles Sanders. You got to let Hurts run some of the read option. Let him get outside because they can do that. They can do that. Now, is there going to be enough to win the game? I don't know, but I think it's the way you have to play the game. If they come out and they just throw the ball all over the place, they're going to lose. That's at least my opinion.
Matt, this is one player I'm really going to keep an eye on this week. I thought Devonta Smith's had a really rough 2 games, and he's pretty much been treated like a number 1 receiver, blanket coverage, all that. Trayvon Diggs, again, they face each other at Alabama, so I kind of write that one off a bit. That could have went your way. But this is a week where I feel Devonta Smith can actually get his and have a big game. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Look, the Chiefs corner situation, they have Mike Hughes, who came over from Minnesota, who has been okay to this point. Charvarius Ward missed last week. He's typically their number 2 corner. He should be back. He practiced yesterday limited with a quad injury. He's a good corner, but he can get beat. The one corner the Chiefs have who's excellent is L'Jarius Sneed. He's in his 2nd year out on Louisiana Tech. He was a day 3 pick a year ago. He's been phenomenal. So if they put him on Smith the whole game, then I think the Chiefs can probably mitigate him to a large degree. But the Chiefs usually don't travel guys and match up a ton. I mean, they'll kind of just play how they play. They line up. They don't worry about it too much. Every once in a while they'll do that. But I think he can have a good game. Look, I think the tight ends really should have a good game against Kansas City. Ertz and Goddard should go nuts because, again, they can't cover. They cannot cover them. I think really if you're the Eagles, you should just be trying to figure out how do we get tight ends and backs on Ben Neiman and Anthony Hitchens, and Nick Bolton, because I'm not exaggerating. They will not cover them once. They cannot. The Chiefs will end up having to try to cover them with Tyrann Mathieu. That's what will end up happening. But yeah, I think this game to me, from the Eagles' offensive standpoint, comes down to can they block up front. The Chiefs have been awful getting home, but Spagnuolo does have creative ways to get pressure if he needs to, and that to me is the game. If they can get to Hurts, I think it's a really long day for Philadelphia. If they don't get to him and he's got some time, then it's a lot more intriguing.
Matty, last Eagles-Chiefs question for you, and then I want to get in one about that thing that's going on up in New England on Sunday night, which should be very interesting. There have been questions about Jalen Hurts here in town, that he gets out of the pocket a little too quickly. I think they're actually overstated, having watched every play of all 3 Eagle games so far. But some people say, yeah, he's looking to make off-schedule plays, get out of the pocket, RPOs. He's holding on to the ball more often. He should have handled it more to Miles Sanders on Monday night. Yeah, seeing as Miles had all of 3 carries. Yeah, he probably should have opted to the run a little bit more often, but he does. He likes to get outside the pocket because he can make plays outside the pocket. But when they go badly, everyone says, I just got to hang in there. You can say the same thing about Patrick Mahomes. I haven't watched that game last week. I thought he was a little skittish and was ready to get out of the pocket. Now he's Patrick Mahomes with an MVP in his pocket and a Super Bowl championship. Jalen Hurts has got all of 7 starts, but was that a legit concern and or criticism of your quarterback that the first couple of weeks, because they've got a pretty rebuilt offensive line in front of them, maybe Mahomes was a little quick getting out of the pocket?
It's been, if there's any criticism of him, and it's really hard to find, that's probably it. And it has been his whole career. He will drift out of the pocket. He will bail out of pockets that he shouldn't bail out of. But like you said, it's kind of hard to get on him when he bails out and then throws a rocket 40 yards downfield, hits some guy in the hands. You're like, well, the hell with it. I mean, let him do it, right? Like when Mahomes became their starter in 2018, I remember 4 or 5, like the first 4 or 5 games, he would do things that were so unorthodox. You know, you'd be like, what is he doing? Like what? Like, and it'd be one of those like, no, oh my God. And then he would throw a missile and hit some guy 30 yards down. You're like, okay. and he did it all the time. And he still does it all the time. So I think like, look, it's a valid criticism in the sense that he shouldn't technically do it. But I almost think he's most dangerous when he does it and he gets outside. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, is he going to run? Is he going to throw? With Hurts, yeah, obviously he's got a lot more to prove. But I think in some ways it stresses the defense out more when it's off schedule and it's outside the pocket and you don't know what he's going to do. So, look, yes, he's a young kid. You want him to kind of go by the book at times and all that. But when I watch Jalen Hurts, and I've watched a lot of Philadelphia this year, and actually all of his starts last year, I think there's a lot of talent there. Like is he a franchise guy? I don't know. It's 7 starts, but he's a smart kid. He clearly, was somebody who was able to adapt to multiple systems in college. I think he can play. And I think sometimes there has to be some patience in the sense that he is learning with a head coach who is learning with a lot of young offensive players around him behind a beat-up offensive line. I think he's going to be a good player. But, you got to live with it. When he makes a great play on the outside, you can't hate when he tries to do it again. That's part of the deal. I mean, Mahomes, that pick against Baltimore, it's one of the worst picks you've ever seen in your life. But he completes that pass like 8 out of 10 times. He just does it. So you can't go crazy when he gets picked. Like, he does it all the time, and it works. And that's part of the deal.
Matt, Joey wants to bring up Bill Belichick. I'll tie this to Andy Reid a little bit here. So I've been getting my big smiles in over the last 2 years because I've been the biggest proponent of it's Tom Brady, it's not Bill Belichick. And Andy Reid could run circles around this head coach if he had a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, or he's done it with multiple quarterbacks. Bill hasn't. So I got to bring the question up to you here. Knowing what we know now, and this is almost 150 games with Bill Belichick without Tom Brady. And what Andy Reid has done with McNabb, Alex Smith, Patrick Mahomes, if you had to rank them now, I know Bill's higher than him, but how much has Reid closed the gap on this guy?
Well, he's closed it. I mean, he's been to 3 Super Bowls, obviously only won one. But I think Reid, in my lifetime, and I'm 33, Reid is the most adaptable offensive coach I've ever seen. I mean, the Chiefs played completely differently with Alex Smith. Completely. I mean, the entire offense was scrapped when Mahomes became the starting quarterback. They changed everything about the way they play football. I don't know too many coaches who would do that, especially considering how successful the Chiefs were with Alex Smith. I mean, they didn't win a Super Bowl, but they were really good every year. And Andy just said, all right, we're done with that. Every year they change the way they play to some extent. I think the thing with Belichick, and obviously, like you mentioned, you're right. Like, without Brady, he has not had a ton of success. But the thing with Belichick that has always impressed me is when you watch them defensively, they are a different team every week.
Yeah.
Like, it's incredible. I remember last year they came to Kansas City on a Monday night game, and they didn't have Cam because of COVID. And Brian Hoyer started the game. And I remember thinking to myself, the Chiefs are going to win this game by 30 points. Brian Hoyer's not going to keep this game close. And Belichick comes out and plays like 8 defensive backs. And for 2.5 quarters, the Chiefs had no idea what to do with it. Like, they should have just run. But they were so flummoxed by it. They kept trying to throw in a coverage. And New England was like within a point with 10 minutes to go in the game. And I think, so to me, like with Belichick, that's the genius. It was when he was the coordinator with the Giants. That's what he did his whole career there. But Andy is kind of the answer to that on the offensive side in a lot of ways. Because he's so capable of just completely switching what he does, and it's incredibly impressive.
All right, Matty V, last one for that game on Sunday night between the Patriots and the Buccaneers, Belichick against Brady. Give me a prediction of any sort. Take it wherever you want. Something that's going to transpire before the game starts till after the game is over and done with. I'm giving you a nice wide berth here. You want to give me a final score? That's fine. But if you want to go in another direction, that's cool too. Give me a prediction for Sunday night Patriots against the Bucs.
I don't think that Brady and Belichick will talk to each other before the game. I think after the game they will, but it'll be a very quick handshake, see you out the door. I don't think there's a lot of love lost. And then for a score, I think the line is like 6 or 7. I think Tampa Bay is going to just crush New England.
Really?
I wouldn't bet against Brady in this game. Belichick can do all he wants. He's not on the field. And they're not nearly as talented as Tampa. Tampa's coming off a loss. I think Brady in this game, if there's ever a game that Brady's going to say, we're not running the ball, I'm throwing it 60 times. I don't care. We're going to stick it in their ear every time we have the ball. I think early in the game, Belichick will get him on a few things because he'll throw wrinkles in. Brady will expect to see one thing he's seen it for 20 years and he'll change something. But I think once Brady figures it out, I think he's going to have a very, very big game on Sunday night.
So Matt, we're not going to get the Belichick Parcells stare down when they met. I think it was 2004 when they just kind of looked at each other and that was it.
I could be wrong. Maybe they're all in love. I don't think so. I think Brady will be more lovey with McDaniels than he will be with Belichick. I think there's just going to be kind of a, okay, hey, how you doing? I'm going to try to kick your ass now for 60 minutes. I think that's going to be
I love it.
Yeah, kind of. The only game I can really think of that has that feel in my entire life was Chiefs-Niners with Montana in '94. Now, that game was at Arrowhead. But there was, the amount of tension going into that game. I was only a kid, but even I remember that game. Game, there was so much tension. Then, of course, Montana ends up winning the game. The Niners got the last laugh. They won the Super Bowl that year. But even when Manning went back to Indy, they left on good terms. There was a tearful press conference. And, I think Manning understood, hey, look, I'm coming off a neck injury, all these surgeries. Brady's like, F you, man. I can still play. You effed up. And I'm going to show you how, I wouldn't want to be Belichick in this game. Brady wins every big game he's ever involved in. You could not pay me enough to be on the sideline tonight or on Sunday for the Pats. I do not think it's going to be pretty.
All right, we'll finish it with this. I'm setting the over-under. In-game cutaways of the owner of the New England Patriots, 1.5.
Oh.
So to get the over, you got to get 2. Will NBC go to Kraft more than twice in a game?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think
really?
The over. If you had said 3.5, I would have taken the over. They're going to be panning up there. Kraft's going to be sitting up there with the dress shirt that always has a different color collar. They're going to be showing him. Oh, yeah. You're going to see a lot of there's going to be a lot of cutaways to boxes, right? Gisele's going to be up there, I'm sure. Going to be showing. Has there ever been, you guys cover the league longer than I have. Has there ever been a game that you can think of where you've had a return like this? Like I said, Montana never went back to San Francisco. It's at Arrowhead. Manning went back on good terms. Unitas never went back. Namath never went back.
Is it Favre Holmgren? They left on good. Holmgren left on good terms. I shouldn't say that, but it's Favre to Minnesota. Maybe that might be it. But that was a year after it happened. So
right, year removed.
That was the only one I could think of. Was Favre. If Rodgers ends up leaving Green Bay and he comes back, that'll be similar. But Rodgers has won 1 Super Bowl. It's like he's an all-time great. Brady is like the prodigal son coming home. That is people forget how god awful the Pats were their entire existence until Brady showed up. That team was the Bengals, okay? And then Brady got there, and they're the greatest dynasty in the history of the sport. By the way, here's my last prediction for that. He is going to get a massive ovation.
Oh yeah, he will.
I've seen people, he's going to get booed. He's not getting. Yes, there's going to be some handful of clowns who will boo him, but he is going to get an overwhelming ovation. That I am certain of.
Right, because before the game, he hasn't thrown 4 touchdown passes.
That's right.
I don't know if they'll cheer him on the way off the field, but they certainly will cheer him on the way into the field.
By the way, Matt, you and I are the same age. I remember that week, the Montana game. I was 6, 7 years old. I just remember the hype of that game. But Frank Gifford did an excellent job. I rewatch that game every once in a while. Frank Gifford did an amazing job hyping up that. I think that was the best Monday Night Football intro of all time.
I was 6, and I remember that game. Like it was yesterday. It was week 2. I think I have it on VHS somewhere. I taped the game as a kid.
It's on YouTube.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I know. They had that game, and then 3 weeks later, they played Denver on a Monday night at Mile High.
Oh, that was
one of the great Monday night games of all time. And I remember, again, 6, stayed up real late that night. I remember it very distinctly. But yeah, look, it should be interesting. I mean, I don't think there's ever been an NFL game quite like this one. It really hasn't.
Matty, we appreciate you getting up early and hopping on with us. You know, we'll touch base a little later in the season. Thanks for jumping on with us today, big guy.
Hey, no problem. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Matt Verderame, from Fansided, outstanding NFL columnist. I knew he'd have some interesting opinions on the game Sunday night. I know the Eagles fans, hopefully they're not licking their wounds like they did against the Cowboys this week after the game against the Chiefs on Sunday. I think it may very well be the case, but we'll save that for tomorrow. All right, come back. We got to put a bow on this show. We're right here on Birds 365.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the memories. Go for the view that goes on forever. Go for the bubbles in your bathtub and in your drink. Go to bed whenever you want. Or don't. Go for him. Go for her. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
At Stateside Vodka, every new customer gets the world's best rocks glass. Free.
What's that?
A rocks glass?
You're telling me that bottle is cut in half?
You could say that.
Holy shit. The glass is for cocktails, right?
It's for this, 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 and that.
Is the length of the glass equal to your...
You betcha.
But is it made out of...
Glass?
Yeah, okay, but is the rim...
Smooth?
Will you stop doing...
That?
I'm the professional here.
And you're telling me I can get one of these glasses for free?
That's right. 1 free rocks glass per customer with each first-time purchase of Stateside Vodka. All from the company that's highly awarded. 0 carbs, 0 sugar, and deliciously tasting vodka. So good, it just disappears.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
When it comes to the fight against insurance companies, large corporations, and the healthcare industry, injured victims are always the underdog. But that doesn't worry us. At Messon Associates, we're an injury law firm from Philadelphia, and we come to fight. Our clients know that they've got representation with a chip on its shoulder, and it's the same chip that makes Philly the toughest city in the country. Call 215-568-3500 or visit us online at messalaw.com. Messon Associates, the toughest injury firm in Philadelphia.
Go for the midnight dares. Go for the game. Go for the hits. Go for the fans. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
All right, coming down the home stretch here on a Thursday edition of Birds 365, which means tomorrow we got a Friday edition of Birds 365, and I'll be here. Johnny Mac will be back. We thank Jeff Kerr for the outstanding job he's done 3 times this week. Outstanding out of you, Jeffrey. But as long as I got you, before we wrap up this bad boy, since tomorrow we're giving you the day off, you want to get on the record here for Chiefs and Eagles on Sunday? Score, outcome, as little as you want, as much as you want. The floor is yours. Eagles, Chiefs, Sunday, Kerr. What does the scoreboard look like? How's it play out down at the link?
I already made my prediction. It already came out on CBSSports.com this morning. So Chiefs 37, Eagles 20. I'm 3-0 picking the Eagles games this year. I'm not proud of that because I was kind of hoping they give Dallas a better show than what they gave them. But I remember thinking like 5 minutes for the game, I'm like, you know what? They're either going to beat them or they're going to get blown out. And they got blown out. And, I was way off on the score prediction. I thought it'd be a lot closer than it was. But the result's the result. And I hope they give Kansas City a game. And I agree with Matt Verderame 100% on this. The Chiefs linebackers, they cannot cover at all. They just can't. And their defense has just not been good. But I have a feeling Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo have a little motivation, a little trick up their sleeves. I know Patrick Mahomes knows this is a big game for Andy Reid. Travis Kelce, same thing. It's, it's going to be Reid's not going to make it an emotional day, but it is going to be one because he's coming back to the place, he really built. They won their first NFC championship. They won an NFC championship at the link there. He did a lot for that franchise. It's definitely going to be emotional. It's only his second time back. It's not like 2013, obviously. That was the game where I kind of laughed at the Eagles because Andy Reid did kick the snot out of them. This time, the Chiefs should roll away with this one. I'll say that.
Couple of things before we wrap the show. I will absolutely tell John McMullen it is his job on Sunday because he gets there about 6 hours before they kick off. He is proud of how early he gets to the stadium on game day.
He does get there early.
That he needs to take note as to when or if there is any acknowledgement of Andy Reid and how it does come down. So we'll get Johnny Mac locked in on that for both you and I, Jeff. Number two, I too, depends on how you decided. I'm 3-0 picking Eagle games as well. Thought they'd win, thought they'd lose. So yeah, I thought the first game was going to be closer than it was. It wasn't. I thought the second game was going to be closer than it was. It wasn't. I said, take the Eagles plus the points. You would have lost on the wager. And I surely thought this last game that the Cowboys just kicked their tails was going to be closer. I probably would have given the points with the Cowboys, but neither here nor there. I'm 3-0 as well. Yeah, and I'm leaning the Chiefs way tomorrow. But you're going to have to tune right back in here to Birds 365 tomorrow. Jeff Kerr, good job this week. Thank you very much for filling the void. We'll talk to you again next week.
Always a pleasure, Jody. I have a blast coming on this. I get to talk Eagles for 2 hours with you. I mean, what is there anything better to do in the morning?
It's better than digging ditches. We can sure as hell say that. And I don't think the Eagles will dig their ditch on Sunday, but I think they're swimming upstream, to use a different metaphor. Come back for more metaphors 22 hours from now, right here on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on